Hello, everybody, and welcome back to.
Conscious from hell.
Today, we are talking about one of the biggest fears in modern workplaces: saying no. Why is it so hard to set boundaries? And how do you do it without risking your job? And to help us break this down, I'm joined by Paulina, co host and co founder of the Culture Code Foundation. She works with organizations to rebuild trust and psychological contracts. And today, she'll help us understand how to protect our energy, our dignity, and our careers. That's a big promise. Welcome, Paulina.
Yes, that's a huge promise, actually. I'm getting a bit worried right now.
How are we doing, Paulina?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm so glad to be back and have the monster voice back to for our
Oh,
intro.
yes.
It's been broken for for quite a few weeks now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been on vacation.
It worked really hard, one sentence a week.
Yes. And now we are back again, and we are getting, let's see, it's Friday the 14th of November, and you actually said before we went on the show that it looked like it's getting dark in outside in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's like I get amazed every year. Like I'm 51 years old. I've tried this 51 times, right? And every year I get amazed on how fast it actually goes dark.
Mm.
But on the other hand, when it tips on is it the 21st of December, I think? That's when it
Yep.
turns around. It goes really fast the other way. And
Sure.
for people that might be listening that lives more south than I do, or south of Denmark, and is not used to experience this. So in the summertime in a Scandinavian country, it's almost light 24/7. Of course, it gets dark at night, but it doesn't get really, really dark. And now at winter, it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, boom, lights off, right? It is insane.
Yeah, I also always underestimate how quickly it changes it back again, because now, like mid-November is like when you really start to realize that it's getting dark, that it's really getting darker earlier, and that it's getting lighter later in the mornings, and so on and so forth. And then just to put that back into your head, okay, but it's only another 4 weeks or so before it turns back around and it starts getting lighter again. Although it takes longer in Germany, I would say it's not. I mean, in terms of it's not as significantly noticeable as quickly as it is in Denmark, but yeah. So just for 5 more weeks before it becomes better again.
Yes, exactly. And for me, I kind of remember that the tipping point is always like first of March, around 1st of March. Then it's like, oh, it's
Yeah,
getting so much lighter again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, we can't really complain in Germany. I mean, yesterday in Leipzig we had 17 degrees. Mid-November we
Oh,
had 17 degrees.
they are talking about snow this weekend in Copenhagen.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it here.
Okay, okay, Paulina, let's go. Before we jump into kind of the tactical stuff here, take us back to the beginning. When did you first realize that people were terrified of setting boundaries at work?
I would say it really hit me when I started noticing the same patterns in very, very different teams, from tech startups to large corporations, because usually in larger corporations you see different things than would see in a startup, but that was very similar in both settings. And I got the sense that people didn't just hesitate to say no, they were actually afraid of saying no. And that fear, you could tell, came only partially from lived experience, own experience. It partially also came from the lived experience of others. So you've heard stories of what happened to other people when they said no, and then some other people would incorporate them and treat those stories as if they'd happened to them themselves. That was really extreme to watch how the narration of it would spread. Just because they had seen or even heard what happened to someone setting a boundary and got punished for doing so. So I realized that saying no wasn't just about assertiveness or time management. It is much more about power, fear of exclusion or fear of punishment, and this unspoken belief that being a good employee means being endlessly available.
And what patterns did you see like over and over and over again?
I would say something that I would call slow erosion. So first of all, you want to be helpful, or especially if you're new in a job, you want to prove yourself. So you say so yes, and then you say another yes, and eventually, sooner or later, you're drowning. But by that point, your reputation is tied so much to being the reliable one and the person who always takes on more work, and any no feels like a betrayal, or you've just unlearned how to say no at this point, because it's just become automatic, right? To say yes every time. And for leaders, I think there is something else that can come into this, because you might want to protect your team by taking on more than you can handle yourself, because you want to be a buffer for your team. And I wanted to be very transparent about that. So I shared too much of my own stress with my team, and by doing so, I blurred the boundary that my role actually required. Instead of protecting them from the stress that I took on myself, I transferred the pressure because they now knew how much pressure I was under. So that is this additional layer on top of it for leaders, because clarity is kindness, especially when you're leading. And if you don't learn to say no as a leader, then your team also never will learn to say no, because they don't see it as an example that is viable.
I am, I would say 100 and maybe even 110% guilty of being the one that also says yes, 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 yes. And then
I remember.
I dig myself so deep
Mm.
that it's sometimes really hard to say no again, right?
Yeah.
And again, let's just be very transparent here on the show, because that is our thing when we're talking about culture, right? You actually asked me here before going on live now if we should postpone the show for the rest of the year, because I'm on a lot of pressure, and I
Yeah.
keep saying yes all the time,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so we actually talked about this just before going on the show. And I think it's a really valuable lesson. But I would also say that if I have to pull from my own experience here, it's like when you actually learn how to say no to the right things, right? Or say no at the right point of time and so on. That is a really good gift. Like you can really feel that the weight is coming off your shoulders.
Yeah, I think it's 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 a fine line, obviously, to know
Yeah.
which are the right things. So it has a lot to do with your own intuition. And a sentence that just keeps stuck with me is that every yes to somebody else is a no to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is 100% true, because a lot of yeses that you give out to other people can also be a yes to yourself. But if you cross a certain threshold where you already have so much on your plate, that it really becomes difficult to handle things, then the saying is definitely true. And I've seen it with so many friends of mine and colleagues and customers, where it's become so automatic to say yes to everything, that even when they were completely drained, they would still put more on their plate. So maybe after today, Lars, think about it. If you don't want to say yes to my proposal to pause the show for a couple of weeks.
No, but actually back to that, and let's just wrap this up really quick. I actually said no to a big thing yesterday. I'm involved in multiple startups, and I actually said no to one of the ones. I'm actually backing out of one of them to protect myself and be kind to myself, and to kind of make sure that I can focus on my main startup and my girlfriend as well, right? And my relationships. So I actually said no and walked away to potential a big pile of money yesterday because I need to be better at saying no.
That's amazing, Lars. I'm really impressed. And
Thank you
we'll
very
dig
much.
into this. I will dig into this offline.
Yes, let's do that. Paulina, why is the fear, and then speaking of this, why is the fear of saying no so universal?
Because boundaries tend to be a direct confrontation with the unspoken deals we all have with our workplace or with our managers. Because usually teams and managers expect you to over deliver. And if that is the unspoken contract, and you then suddenly say, I need to prioritize my well-being, then you're not just managing workload, you are actually challenging the identity, the loyalty, and the power structure within the team. And that's risky. And I've seen so many teams where it's become kind of an emotional blackmail situation, that if you're not here, then the rest of the team needs to shoulder more work. So don't you dare leave us hanging here. It's never outspoken. It's always just boiling under the surface. But I've seen that time and time again.
I have experienced that firsthand, but that's another story. And speaking of all of this and what we just talked about just a second ago, Leo, what's actually happening psychologically when someone can't say no?
So this goes hand in hand with this perceived emotional blackmail situation, because people then usually experience an anticipatory guilt and rejection and anxiety. And we've spoken about this before. It is super crucial for us human beings, from our evolutionary standpoint, to belong to a group, right? And the brain interprets the no to someone else as a potential social rupture, especially in hierarchical cultures where obedience usually is tied to safety. And basically, so the no that you are uttering takes yourself out of the group, out of the belonging. That's what your
And
brain at
how?
least tells you.
Yeah. The brain or the mind is a powerful thing, right? In both a good way and a really bad way sometimes. And how do you and I'm going to do this in quotation marks for everybody just listening in here. And how do unwritten rules shape all of this?
I would actually say they shape everything. In flat cultures, the expectation might be over collaboration. In hierarchical ones, it tends to be more over compliance. And if nobody explicitly says it's okay to say no and models that it's okay to say no, people will definitely assume it's not. And that is also why I believe it is so important to have those rules out in the open, to really speak about expectations, etc. But we'll talk about this later in more detail. And at this point, I just want to speak about early warning signs, so that leaders out there might be able to identify that something like this is happening in their teams. The biggest one is people apologizing for not being available 24/7, or for not reacting within 30 minutes to a message, especially when it's late at night in the evening. And if you see that, then you're experiencing a culture that's already stretching its psychological safety very, very thin.
And let's kind of jump back into the helicopter again here and look at it like in broad aspects. Is there any like popular myth about boundary setting that you would like to kind of bury forever here on our podcast?
That's a tricky one, actually, and I'm not sure if everyone listening out there will agree with me, but I would definitely say a myth is that you need to feel confident to set a boundary. You do not. You just need to be very clear. And obviously, it is easier to do so in an environment where there are certain frames for doing so. But generally speaking, confidence for me is a result of how you work and how you're setting boundaries. It is not a prerequisite. Because waiting to say no until you feel ready to say no, that's just burnout in the making.
And what's the smallest safe starter boundary? Let's like go back to the basics here, right?
I think my favorite one is the priority trade. So especially when your superior comes to you, asks you to take on more, then to really put it out in the open. Sure, I'm happy to take this on. At the same time, something else will need to move. Which of my current tasks should I pause? That approach is respectful, professional, and it shows that you're balancing, not blocking anything. You're not resisting the ask. You are inviting shared ownership and prioritization.
And at the same time, what's the biggest mistake people make when they are trying to set boundaries?
That's hands down over explaining. Because if you explain too much, when you talk too much, you will always sound unsure and you will invite objection or negotiation from your superior. So you don't need to justify your capacity. And I'm right, like saying something like, "Oh, I already have 42 tasks on my plate, and I really need to be at home tonight because my kids are coming home for dinner at 5, whatever." Right? You don't need to justify your capacity. You just need to state with clarity and respect. And ideally, if somebody pushes your task over the edge in written form, then you can also prepare your answer in terms of, okay, I've thought about this, and I believe that pushing this task until a date that works for you makes the most sense because ABC, right? So come with a prepared, constructive solution on the prioritization already. That can make the decision even easier for your superior. But if they're just standing next to you and just giving you the ask in the moment, then inviting them in, okay, what should we pause instead, is the best approach, because you won't have time to really think it through beforehand.
I kind of just remembered when we have these podcast recordings, right? And we talk about like, yeah, in this case, like how do you handle this and so on, and you say avoid over explaining. There's so many things that we talk about that resemblance is sales psychology, right? So at the same time, and we both come from sales, that's why I'm bringing it up, right?
Yeah.
That when you're trying to sell something, don't over explain it. People just think you're full of BS,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
sales is psychology, leading is psychology, interacting with humans is always psychology, right? So the same, because it always happens in a relationship, And every relationship is based on human psychology at the end of the day. So the same mechanisms do apply.
100%. And talking about these, let's call them scripts here. What makes them so effective?
You mean boundary setting scripts, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just want to clarify it for the listeners. So I would say boundary setting scripts are effective because they name the constraint clearly. Constraint can be time, energy, focus, right? All of the, or whatever you can think of. So constraint. They reinforce the shared goals without opposition. And thirdly, they focus on your actions, not controlling anybody else. And that is key because we are taught by social media at the moment that a boundary is how others should behave towards you. And that's BS. A real boundary is about your own actions and about what you are doing or what you're not doing, or what you're allowing into your life or what you're not allowing into your life. So that is a big myth from my end. Make yourself clear that a real boundary, a good one, a healthy boundary, always is about yourself, not others.
And where do people usually go wrong when they try to, let's say, soften their boundaries too much?
Yeah, and that's basically already the big mistake, right? If you try to soften it, then it's not a boundary anymore. Then it opens up for bargaining. And the softening can sound like, "I'm sorry, I wish I could, I feel really bad, but," right? All of those really open the door again and are not a boundary in itself. So let me be clear, a soft tone is fine, but your words themselves, they must be firm.
I am so guilty of doing that. I'm so guilty. Oh my God. I'm now it's, everything is in my, oh, stop doing it, Lars, stop doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I'm doing it correctly all the time either, right? Just because I know how to do it right doesn't make it easier to do it right.
No. And again, like you're saying here, it just backfires every single time, right?
Yeah.
So how do you encourage someone to sound confident even if they don't feel it?
You can try something that I call neutral authority. That means keeping it very factual, keeping it very grounded, and focus on the structure of this kind of script, because then that is something you can train. This script is something that you can train, or the structure is something you can repeat. And so the baseline, not the exact same words here, right? Please don't use those words, but the structure of it is basically, that won't work for me. Here's what I can offer instead. So those are the two parts of the script at the end of the day.
Simple but yet powerful, right?
Yeah.
So now let's jump to the next part here. So the moment after you set a boundary is often kind of the worst, because you can, you get that pause that nobody really likes. How do you coach people through that moment?
I mean, honestly, I believe that if you use those scripts really well, it already reduces the this bad moment after setting a boundary. It doesn't completely erase it, but it reduces it. And the other part is, you definitely need to teach people to expect the discomfort. And you need to teach them that the discomfort itself doesn't mean that they did something wrong. It just means that they did something new that they are not yet comfortable with. The more often you will set a clear boundary, the more used you will get to doing so, and that means you're outside of you're moving the learning zone back into your comfort zone. So you will start feeling more comfortable with setting a boundary. But at the beginning, you have to expect the discomfort because you're doing something differently than you used to. And I also want to be very clear: feeling guilt doesn't mean you are guilty. Guilt usually means that you care. And so my advice always is to sit with the guilt for a moment, but don't let it run the show. So accept that it's there, and then act professionally in spite of it, and not let it dictate you into, yeah, I know this is really bad for you, where we're back at the softening point, right? That will open the doors back up.
And I like the thing you said in the beginning about the discomfort, right? And for me, I always use the analogy that I often bring out when it comes to discomfort about training. I do train a lot. I've mentioned that a couple of times on the show. And for me, I just kind of compare it to like the first time you go down and you have a coach and they ask you to do 20 burpees and you're almost puking. And yeah, I can see from your facial expression that you tried it.
You have done this to me.
Yes, I have. And I'm proud. No, so again, like discomfort. I think there was actually a boxer that told me that one time that the first time you step into a ring for training and somebody punches you in the face, you go like, whoa, 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 what happened? 2 years after, when somebody punch you in the face, you punch right back, right?
Mm.
And I think that's kind of speaks into the discomfort that you just have to get used to it. Because if you do it over and over again, it's not uncomfortable to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that goes in every aspect of life, right?
Absolutely every aspect. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so if let's imagine that I'm an employee here. How would I handle a manager who reacts badly or passive aggressively?
First of all, I would say you also need to sit with that for a moment, because that is going to feel really bad. So again, take a deep breath, really sit with that at the moment, and don't react out of defensiveness, but rather turn towards curiosity. You could say, for example, I've noticed a shift in your mood in how you responded. Can we align on expectations? That is really my go-to move. I call it respond with curiosity and questions, because you avoid the judgment of your superior, and at the same time you avoid the defensiveness. You invite some truth in, and you also invite your manager to help you clarify what's where to focus on, where to put priorities.
And what's the difference between a healthy reaction on one side and a red flag on the other side?
I think a healthy reaction should sound like something like, thanks for flagging this, let's figure it out together. A red flag, and I think I assume that most people have heard one of those throughout their career. Well, I guess we all have to carry our weight, or if you can't handle it, maybe this isn't the right place for you. So, and it's not just about the words, it's also about the tone, right? If there is some snappiness in there, if there's some irony or sarcasm in there, that's usually already a red flag, because red flags will tend to shame you for having limits.
Yeah, I have tried that so many times. Okay, let's be honest. Some workplaces punish boundary settings. What then? What do I do?
Mm. Um, the first thing is don't gaslight yourself or don't let yourself be gaslighted. If every no that you're putting out there gets you sidelined, then this is not a boundary problem. It is actually a power problem and a culture problem.
And what are the non-negotiable signs that it's time to leave? Like run, Forest, run.
I would, for me, clearly, if you're being punished for honesty, if your limits are constantly ignored, or when you feel dread before you even speak up.
Yeah. And what's the first step when somebody realizes, oh my God, the problem isn't me, like it's the culture. Like, what's the first step then?
Mm. I mean, as you know me, I'm convinced that every single employee can influence the culture in a positive way. So it's not something of I'm a victim now and I have to leave immediately because the culture sucks. I rather say I tend to use this framework: name it, own it, change it. Because firstly, name the dynamic that you're seeing, write it down, speak it out loud, discuss it with your team, with your manager, with other peers. Then own your response to that. What is within your own control? What can you change? How can you um, focus on making this a better situation, and then actually change? And you can change one small behavior at the beginning. You don't have to wait for the system to change. You can start choosing yourself inside the system, and this will, right? You know me. Own yourself, own your own actions, own your own responses. I think that's extremely, extremely powerful. Obviously, it has
I
limits, right? But it's a start.
Yeah, and I know I might say something that you might not agree 100% on here, but I often say to people like if you're unsatisfied with the situation, you're the one that has to start to change.
I 100% agree with that,
So
because you
instead
can
of
always
complaining like, "Oh, I hate this and I hate that," and so on, it's like, "But what are you
change
doing
it.
to change it? Yeah,
Yeah,
what are you doing
exactly.
to change it, right?" And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that like, let's say you and I were in the same workplace, right? And we are unhappy with it. It's not that with what's going on or the system or whatever. It's not like when I say that I mean that I have to start changing that in the company we're working with. I'm just meaning if you're unsatisfied, you can leave yourself, right? Or you can try to change it. So you can change the scenario on
Yes.
everything, like, right?
The smallest thing you can always do is change your response to a situation. I mean, you
Exactly.
choose if you're getting pissed off about somebody else, or if you're just accepting that this is what is happening. That's the
Exactly.
smallest ownership that you can have over your own reactions. So I fully agree, and this is something that I'm preaching everywhere. Don't be a victim, be an actor.
No.
And
Yeah.
I'm not actor in terms of movie actor, but actor in terms of get moving,
Act.
do
Yeah.
something,
Act on it.
change something about yourself, change, because you can always only change what's within your own control. You can't change anything else.
Exactly.
But
And
it's very powerful.
Paulina, like when we get to the end of these shows here, right? I like to like give out practical advice here to our listeners here. So if you could give our listeners just 3 practical things to do this week to protect their boundaries, what would that be, or what would they be?
First of all, start with auditing your yeses. So look back at the last 5 times you said yes to something, and then think about, did you actually want to say yes? And what did those yeses cost you? Secondly, try one priority trait script this week, just once. Could be even with a friend or a peer. Doesn't have to be with your superior. It doesn't have to be in the workplace. Just try it out once to start building that muscle. And as a leader, especially, define your psychological contract with the team. So speak with your team. What do we want to protect in how we show up for each other? And then create 5 to 7 safety norms. Because, as I said at the beginning, if you talk about the norms openly and clearly, that helps everyone involved to live out in that safety and not guess what is actually okay. So post those safety norms and live them.
I could not agree anymore. Paulina, as always, thank you very much for sharing your expertise. And today we unpacked why boundary settings feel scary. Ooh, it's Halloween right now, so that's actually really good. How psychological contracts shape your behavior, and most importantly, how to say no without sabotaging your career. Paulina, if somebody wants to reach out to you or have questions or just want to follow your work and so on, please enlighten them where they can find you.
You can always find me and my company at culturecodefoundation.com. You can also find myself and the company on LinkedIn. Like always, we'll link every social media handle up in the show notes.
Yes, we will. And just before we round up here, we the last 2 episodes we recorded, and they should be out by now, with was with Bilal as a guest, and we love to have guests on. We love to tell stories, right? So if somebody's listening out there and they want to appear on the show or just tell the story, and we'll do this anonymously if you prefer, then please reach out. Like Paulina said, everything is in the show notes. So Instagram, I would say TikTok, that's not in the show notes, but Instagram and LinkedIn, and they can just reach out to us and we'll be happy to bring you on the show. Paulina, thank you very much for your time. And to our listeners, thanks for listening to Cultures from Hell. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with somebody who needs stronger boundaries in their work life. And for the algorithm, please give it a thumbs up. See you in the next episodes.
Thank you, Lars.